Hey guys, this will be our last little lecture in terms of China. So it'll be our last little notes we'll do on this before our test next week. I'll talk about the last empire, last dynasty, will in this ancient Chinese period, which is the Han Empire. And Han is very, very important. In fact, if you look at an ethnic Chinese person, they actually consider themselves. They use the word Han to kind of describe themselves. And so it's a really important idea looking at China and the things that happened in the Han Empire. Now, Han started as a small state in the Qin Empire, and when they really came to power when Qin's son started, making things worse in China, and a ruler named Liu Bang came out and basically defeated the Qin ruler and took over the empire. Essentially, is what he did. Now he decided to rule a little differently. He took the idea of strict legalism, that all power to the ruler, everything was done for the ruler like Qin did, and mix it with Confucianism. Basically, that if all you do is punish people, you're going to get nowhere. You have to have a strictness, but with a moral guide. And so he basically took the two ideas of legalism and Confucianism and kind of meshed them together to make one big idea. And it's kind of funny that he basically said we're going to punish everybody, even punish government people. If government people screwed up, they got punished, like beheadings and those kind of things. Now the Han had a huge army, and they tried adding a lot of land to their empire, and they actually took China and expanded it really, really far. You can tell from the map on the back of your notes here, they expanded into Turkestan, Turkmenistan, into South Vietnam and Laos. They added those different places. Now he kind of ruled like Qin in a way that he gave people to regions to command, but he actually called them nobles, even though they didn't really have freedom. They were nobles, but they didn't have like that whole thing with the Zhou Empire where they had the army and the power, that kind of stuff. They're more like a governor, if you will, that he gave them power to, and he kind of made sure that people had power in terms of ruling that area, but they sort of answered to him. So it's kind of mixing that, respect for rulers and Confucianism with that, I'm still in charge idea of legalism. Now there were social classes in the Han Empire, and so we kind of see more social class develop now. You have peasants who obviously are small farmers; they scrape by. A lot of them own their own land or their own store, that kind of thing. On top of that, we have a gentry, if you will, rich men. They weren't part of the government, but they had a lot of money. They had a big farm, they were a big store, a big shop, those kind of things. We had noble classes, which were the guys who controlled part of government. They were in there, controlling parts of government. They were the rulers of those little states, those kind of things. Even though they weren't like a noble in terms of like money and power and army, they were still a considered noble class. Last, you have your rulers and officials. So this would be the emperor and their assistants, the bureaucracy, if you will, kind of the rulers, people who has helped the Han emperors rule over their little piece of land. Now, they do things a little different in terms of the bureaucracy. It wasn't about your name, it was more about what you could do. They actually hired people on merit versus birth. So merit means that they pick the best people for government jobs. They just wouldn't pick people based off their name, based off who their parents were, whatever. You actually had to take what's called a civil service exam. There's a test to see basically how smart you were. And if you were smart enough to get the job, then you still get the job. You got the job. If you weren't smart enough, then you didn't get the job. It's kind of funny, we still use these in government today. You try to get a job in the state government, part of your application is taking a test. And so you have to score a certain level on that test in order to get that job. They also develop schools. They develop like public schools to train people to do government jobs. And the whole purpose of these schools was to make sure that government officials knew enough, were educated enough to rule the country. Now what they did is they based all their teachings off of teachings of Confucius. So kind of Confucius comes back here, an idea that if you have rulers that are respectful, they respect the people, they work hard all the time, they keep getting better in education, then they're going to be better rulers and keep the respect of the people. And so you kind of see the ideas of Confucius really come back here in this time during the Han Empire. But these civil service exams, are a big change in terms of how things are ruled in China. And we do use these ideas today in the United States in a lot of government positions as well. Now, I found the most powerful ruler for the Han was a guy named Han Wudi. He was a very powerful Han ruler whose biggest thing is that he decided to expand Chinese rule. He's the guy who basically pushed China from right around the Huanghe or Yellow River, you can find on your map, to south of the Yangtze River. And south into Vietnam, those kind of places. Basically expanded China to a much larger area using a really, really big army. Now we also see Chinese technology expand during this time. One of the biggest things we see is iron casting. Where we start making things out of iron. And the iron casting, they create like iron things like this up here, eventually lead to steel production. And so we see steel being produced in China as well. Also, through a process of taking, wood scraps, those kind of things, we see paper develop in China also. the idea of using paper. So we start seeing things written on paper, art being placed on paper versus in stone, those kind of things that you see in other parts of the world at this time yet. And so paper becomes a big part of Chinese life. Um, Also, trade-wise, they developed ships that have better sails. They had, normally before the ships only had one sail, and so you can only go if the wind was blowing or not. If the wind was blowing, it caught the wind. If it wasn't blowing, well, too bad. Now they created ships with fore and aft sails and angle sails here that could actually move even if the wind, no matter what direction the wind was blowing, you get some propulsion for your ship. Also, see down here, Chinese ships were one of the first ships to develop rudders, and so they could actually steer a lot easier than just trying to steer with the wind. They could steer a lot easier than other ships could. So it led to a lot better trade, those kind of things. Also, this time period is known for its art, known for its sculptures, also known for writing. This is when a lot of the Confucian classics are written down on paper, obviously, as we read paper, and it started becoming required reading for children, schools, those kind of things at this time. So the idea of Confucian ideas of respect for family, respect for elders, the ideas of morality, the ideas of hard work, of continuing education, all become a big part of Chinese life during this time. Now, eventually, the Han fall apart. Remember that dynastic cycle before. Well, over time, the government had to keep taxing people. Eventually, the peasants were out there being taxed too much, and revolted. The group that revolted were called the Yellow Turbans. They were called, and so eventually, I have the wrong picture on here, but that's okay. I don't ignore this picture. Use this picture up here. So eventually, this group of peasants were unhappy with being poor, unhappy with being taxed so much, and they had to sell their land off. And some of them started revolting against the Han government. Now, eventually, the Chinese leaders, the Han leaders, were able to put down the peasants. But because this whole infighting between the two groups, eventually the dynasty fell apart. It's kind of the idea of that dynastic cycle where people are happy, then the government starts going bad, and the people start getting unhappy. They overthrow the government, and we'll see a new dynasty come to power. Problem with this is that China was not really unified at the time, and so three different kingdoms were ruling China. Eventually, Mongolian nomads from the north, they went through those holes in the Great Wall, or around it, through it in some cases, and attacked China, actually ruled China for a little bit. And we see a little bit of difference in terms of how China is connected with the rest of the world from there. We'll talk more about some topics later on. We'll come back to China as we get into the Middle Ages after Greece and Rome. Thanks for listening, guys. Make sure your notes are done for Monday so we can talk about them next week. Thanks a lot, guys. See you later.